What's up, everyone? This is Big Poner, and I'm here with probably one of the most OP builds that have ever hit Path of Exile. This is a FrostBlade build, something that hardly no one is playing. I spent a lot of time on POB trying to make something that was really different from what most people are playing, that would be absolutely insane for pretty much all aspects of the game. This build can do everything besides Elemental Reflect. Elemental Reflect is something that you absolutely cannot do, but even Temp Chains is something that's very easy because once you build stacks, you're just going to be world blading through everything. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this, and while I'm going through the map, I will go ahead and talk to you about some of the stuff that's going on, and then I will give you a breakdown from beginning to end. Give you some suggestions for some gear, but this build is in the tankier gear about 6.5 million DPS. In the DPS gear, it's about 10 million DPS. No headhunter. Almost all of the gear is craftable. And there are some really cheap options that you can use, and this build is still super OP. One thing that you are definitely going to want is Tribal Fury, because it's an absolutely OP anointment. You are going to want to wait till you have a really good amulet to anoint on, because it does take a gold oil. I believe it's gold, opalescent, silver. You can look it up though, it's Tribal Fury. Hey, I got a little bleedy on me. And we'll go back and do this Blight encounter. Got anything on the other side? Yeah. Throw a little bit of slows in here. So, you'll actually see the real damage of the build now, because our totems are going to boost our damage a lot, but there's not really very many times that we need them because the damage of the build is so high. We also have Vol on the totems, so if you really get in trouble, you really need a damage boost, you're able to pop the Vols, which you're able to carry 2 charges on those. But as you can see, I mean, the mobility, throw a little bit of slows on here. Just blink over to wherever there's red stuff. Kill it. Blink back. Bam. Blight encounter shredded. So what the Tribal Fury does, if you're not familiar with it, is every time you attack, it adds an extra attack, which is pretty big because it's adding a whole extra attack for each attack. So my build at full stacks is 10.2 attacks per second. So, you know, add an extra attack every attack, that's an extra 10.2 attacks per second, which is a pretty big deal. So pretty flask clear. We didn't even use the Vol. Squash that guy real quick. As you can see, very fast at clearing the map. Tier 16 map. Got some frags on there. But you're thinking, oh, well, you've got all this gear. You've got 10.2 million DPS. You've got all this crazy gear. The thing is, I wasn't wearing that gear. What was I wearing? I was wearing a wasp nest. You can buy this claw for a chaos, probably less. What was I using? Edziri's buckler. I was also wearing this because I figured you guys might be like, oh, he's got an Assassin's Mark ring. I can't afford 3 exalts to 8 exalts. That's stuff that eventually you are going to want to upgrade to. But where's my real gear? Oh, there we go. There's some real gear. But, as you can see, even with me using really crappy gear, or not as good gear. The build absolutely shreds, and that's kind of my point. I kind of nerfed myself for the video so you could see it and be like, wow, build is good, but I probably can't afford it. Well, the thing is all of the other gear on this build is craftable and pretty cheap, and by removing and putting on stuff that doesn't really fit my build, like this circle does something for me, but like my HP is higher with this ring, more critical chance. I have the Assassin's Mark. This doesn't really do that much for me. It gives me extra attributes. I don't need the extra attributes. It gives me a crit multiplier. That's the one thing on this. It's good in the percent life, but it gives me less life. Um, Obviously, the difference between these is huge. I mean, I'm at 84,000. Now I'm at 109,000. Really big difference. Which that's like my base before I start boosting up. The point is this build is extremely OP even if you don't have all of the best in slot gear. That Ziri's buckler I specifically use because it's something everyone can find, and it does absolutely nothing for me. It gives me movement speed, but as you can see, what my movement is mostly based on is the whirling blades, which scales off of my attack speed, which I would be even faster with my claw because the wasp nest is much slower than my actual claw. Um, so now I'm going to kind of go over some of the stuff that you're going to want to look for, what you're going to want to go for. We're going to start with the flasks. The flasks are something that you want to pay attention to, and the reason why is because as you're building your character, you're not going to want to overcap resistances. You can see as I'm going through the video, I always have my flasks up. It's because you have such high clear speed, such high regen on the flasks that your flasks are always up. Um, so as you can see, my resistances are not over 75. They're high enough that with the 35% from the Wise Oak, I have enough that even if I'm in a map that gives me negative to resistances, I'm still over that 75. That's what's important, but you don't want to have way crazy resistances, and the reason why is because you're going to have your Bismuth Oak flask up all of the time, so you want to save those stat points and put them into stuff that's going to be more useful for you, like more evasion, more HP, more critical strike chance, more critical strike multiplier, more attack speed. Those are the things that you're going to want out of the build. So let's talk about priorities. We're going to start with the Helm. You're going to want HP. Eventually you can craft this. This is a super cheap craft. It looks like really good Helm. It is a really good Helm. But this is super cheap to craft. It's not something you have to buy. It's something that when you have the ability to craft it, it'll be cheap to craft because this is crafted with just pristine fossils and frigid fossils, which are two of the cheapest fossils in the game. And you're going to use a 2-socket resonator, which is also super cheap, which if you do any delving, you have more of these, then it will take you to make this build. I really don't know how many I have. Alright, well, I use a lot of pristine fossils, but I've got 9 pristine fossils left and 23 frigids. The point is, they're super cheap, so it's a super cheap thing to roll. So our chest. The end goal is to, or the best in slot for this is to have a tier 1 Elder mod for critical strike chance. It's not something that's required. The reason I can say that is this ring is adding a lot more critical strike chance, critical strike multiplier, everything than that 1.35. That 1.35 is a big boost because the build is based around crit chance, crit multiplier. When you have all of these things, your critical strike chance will be 100%. So eventually, if you like the build and you're making currency, you will make a lot of currency with this build because really fast clear times. So eventually you will want to make this. Something like mine is not exactly realistic to go after for most players. The best way to go about this is to do a multi-mod. So I would say to craft this, you're probably going to want like 5-6 exalts. Buying one will cost you more. The way that you're going to craft this is pretty simple. You're going to buy yourself an Assassin's Garb base, or any base that you prefer. I like the Assassin's Garb. I like the Implicit, and it's close to the highest base evasion rating. You're then going to want to perfect fossil it. You're going to want to perfect fossil it till it has a high quality. I settled at 28%. It goes up to 30%. Then you're going to want to put your sockets in. Then you're going to want to link it. Before you do that, you're going to want to add more quality through your crafting bench. It costs you 4 chaos to put on the quality, which will give you another 18 quality, which is going to increase the likelihood that you're able to hit your 6 sockets and your 6 links. You can just buy a chest that has 6 sockets and 6 links, but that's going to cost you a lot more. Crafting it, even if you get unlucky, it should still cost you less, because just getting a chest with 6 sockets, 6 link on a best type base is probably going to cost you at least 6 exalts, which is what we're going to spend probably to make the whole chest with everything that we want on it. So I would suggest doing the craft yourself. I will release some videos on how to do these crafts. Specifically, I'll make some of the stuff for you guys so you can see exactly how to do it if you have more questions. So look out for those videos. Um, Moving on from there, this is a slot that you can pretty much just use for whatever stuff that you need. For me, I needed a little bit more cold resistances. Going back to the flask, this flask is going to give us damage penetration to the resistance that our uncapped is the highest. So I needed 18% cold. I needed this 18% cold resistance. That was important. I needed a little bit more cold resistance so that I would be getting that 14% penetration. Also, the other rolls on it are good for me. The build really lacks strength and intelligence, so the strength and intelligence, the added cold damage, tier 1 cold damage gives me a lot of damage. Life on kill, that's what the build's based around. I already kind of explained that. Spiked gloves, good base to go for, or you can go with an evasion base, whether you want damage or more evasion. There's kind of a breaking point for evasion. I'm kind of at that breaking point with the gear that I already had on, so that's why I went for a little bit of armor. A little bit of armor with my choice of granite flask. When I pop that, 24% damage reduction. There's an alternative for this granite flask, the DPS version. So if you're lacking damage, go with the Lion's Roar. That's going to give you more damage. It'll also give you a little bit of space when you're fighting stuff, but it can be a little bit annoying. The reason why is because the knockback can work to your benefit, because it can give you a little bit of space, keep stuff from hitting you. But on the other side of that, when they have the little bubbles, you might push them out of your range, and then you have to roll back into it. It's not really a big deal. Once you practice the build, you'll get really good at doing it, but that's something to pay attention to. DPS version, tankier version. As far as a shield, something I want to cover between um, shield, you can pretty much do anything that you want with, but it is the cheapest way to make it so that you can have the same number of auras that I have. I'm running 4 auras. I'm running Hatred, I'm running the Herald of Ice, I'm running the Herald of Purity, and I'm running Precision. The way that I'm doing that is with a level 4 Enlightened support, but this is not required. You can get 15% reduced mana reservation on socketed gems in your shield. It will actually give you a larger reduction to the mana reservation than a level 4 Enlighten will. So you can prioritize that 15% reduced mana reservation, which is the tier 1 version, on a Shaper shield, which shields are super cheap. Hardly no one uses them. That's another great thing about this build. Tankiness because you have a shield. Shields aren't desirable, so you should be able to find a good one pretty cheap. And you'll be able to find the stuff that you want. Socketed mana reservation, cheap way to go about getting the auras. This makes it so that now you can have the same effective stuff that I have without having a 4 Exalt gem. You can get a 50 Chaos shield. And by my demonstration, I was using a Zeri Buckler that was doing nothing for me. So there you go. You basically have a free slot to be the same effectiveness as you just saw my build without using my Assassin's Mark. Eventually you want to go for the Assassin's Mark. It's a best in slot combination. The other thing that I want to point out is I was using a non-shaper item, so I wasn't even getting the bonuses from my Mark of the Elder Ring. That's how much I was nerfing down this build, because you might have still been like, oh, well, he's got that critical strike chance on that. I had minus 75% damage. So I had a lot of nerfs going on in my build to try and make it so that you could see what you can cheaply get this build to. I don't know if I covered this on the Helm. The Helm, your priority is HP. and then negative to cold resistance. Negative cold resistance is the best damage increase that you can get for the build. You're close to stuff, so go for that. It's nice. This is an HP damage slot, kind of in a weird way. The Ice Golem is a cheap enchantment. Enchantments really aren't that important. It's something that's nice if you can buy a high level base with Ice Golem buff, Frostblade buff. Either one of those things would be good for the build. As far as Amulet, best in slot, like I said, Tribal Fury. It's going to be one of the first things that you're going to want to get a really good one of, is your Amulet, because you want the Tribal Fury enchantment. Like I said, it's expensive. It uses a gold oil, opalescent, and silver, I believe. But look it up to make sure. Also, if I'm wrong on that, she tells you what the anointment is when you put the oils in. So don't be yelling at me if my memory's bad. I've made 3 characters in the last week. Anyways, the stats you see on this, you're going to want to go for a multi-modded necklace, and the reason why is because there's some really nice mods that you can't roll naturally. So the investment on a necklace like this is going to be like probably like 3 to 5 exalts, depending on how long it takes you to get your roll. Rolling the initial stats is going to be pretty cheap outside of using annulment orbs. I'm going to be putting up some videos on how to grind currency really well. I've grinded probably about 2,000 exalts this season. Absolutely insane amount of exalts, and a lot of people complain about not being able to get currency. I'm going to put up some videos to help you guys get currency, so building something like this will be a couple gaming sessions to get it running as far as the currency it takes to do a build like this. So moving on, we know stat priority, critical, and chest. Belt. This is going to be a place that you're going to want to get resistances, HP. I've got 13% max energy shield on it. Like, that does nothing for me. The little bit extra armor, it's nice. That's one of the reasons why I have the damage reduction I do have. I've got the armor on the shield, and I've got shield nodes that increase the armor. You could build an evasion one if you want to get your evade higher. Like I said, I personally like having a little bit of the physical damage reduction. This is a luxury slot. When you're building the character, you're going to want to get the stats that you need. If you need a lot of resistances and you've got good items other places and you don't want to get resistances there, get resistances on your boots. Eventually, this is a luxury item you're going to want to craft. This is a craft that's going to cost you about like guaranteed 3 exalts, because it's 2 exalts for craft multiple modifiers. It's 1 exalt for cannot be frozen. And then the increased movement speed and cannot be chilled is 4 chaos. So basically alt spam till you get what it is that you want. Multi-mod, put that stuff on there. Why is this so important? Because if you don't have these boots, you need to give up one of these flasks. I would get rid of Adzeres. The reason why, this gives you survivability, or it can give you damage with survivability, and you need everything else. You can't lose the Diamond Flask. The reason why you can't lose the Diamond Flask is because your critical strike chance is lucky, makes it so that I have an effective 100% critical strike chance, which makes it so that all of my critical strike multiplier is pure increased damage. If I get 50% increased critical strike multiplier and I have a 100% chance to critical strike, it gives me 50% more damage. If I had 100,000, I had 50% multiplier, I have 150,000. If I have 500% multiplier, 100,000 becomes 600,000. That's why this is so important. You can't skimp on this. Use Path of Building. If your critical multiplier is not at 100%, there is a mod that you can do on this flask that will add up to 80% critical strike chance. There's people that, if you don't have the mod, there's people that sell them probably like 20 chaos. You can buy one that has 80% increased critical strike chance. That's a cheap way to boost the critical strike chance for when you can't afford the critical strike chance on attacks on your chest, when you can't afford an Assassin's Mark ring. There's your cheap way to do it, and you can have the same effect. Once you have these, obviously you're going to want to switch these out because this is a big damage boost. We can watch my damage: 109,000, 129,000. That's like 15-16% increased damage. That's a big boost. So eventually you're gonna want to do that, and it also makes it so that I can never be chilled, I can never be frozen, which is a pretty big deal. Why is that a big deal? Because I'm moving through maps really fast. I'm squishy, but the thing is anytime I hit, I instantly get my life back. If I were to get frozen, even in the amount of time it takes me, unless my flask is on an always press, the amount of time it takes me to hit that flask, I could die. So having something like that is just really nice. It's something you definitely want to work on, but the key thing with any build is always work on what your weaknesses are. So if you're having trouble surviving, work on the survivability upgrades. If you feel like your damage is low, your clear speed is low, work on an upgrade for your damage. Work through the stuff, and eventually you'll wind up with a really OP build. Your build doesn't have to be exactly like this. Like I said, the only things that are really required, end game, if you're trying to min-max, get an Assassin's Mark, get the tier 1 critical on here, get a really good necklace, and put the Tribal Fury on it. The rest of it, besides the Flask setup, is pretty much just what you want. I dropped the Quicksilver Flask, and the reason why is because Whirling Blade scales on your attack speed. That's why as I get my Frenzy charges, you can see the character speeds up. It just gets faster. I'm not really doing a lot of running, so having a Quicksilver Flask isn't really doing much for me because I'm whirlblading everywhere, which whirlblading is faster than Quicksilver. And I also have, Flame Dash to get over stuff. So that's kind of the direction you want to go. I am going to give you some tips now because this is probably one of the least played builds in the game. So most players are not going to have a character that they can immediately switch over to this build. And even if you have another build, you're probably going to want to make a new build. You don't want to just delete your build you're currently playing. So these are going to be the best items for you to start out with. Obviously, Tabula Rasa. It's a divine orb. Everyone should have one if they're going to make another character. Wanderlust. Immune to freeze and 20% movement speed from level 1. Absolute must. Goldrim. It's probably the best level 1 cap. 32% all resistances. I mean, it's a good one. This isn't as important as these two. Your level 1 claw. Last resort. You could probably get through a couple acts before having to swap. Find something better, swap it in. You're going to put your 6th link in here, so you only need slots basically for your mobility. My suggestion, if you're trying to go fast, buy all the jewels, put them in your inventory. You're not going to be worried about most of the loot, so as they level up, you can slot in your stuff. This is something you don't want to get at level 22. If you want to clear and get through the acts really fast, you want to be able to move really fast. So as soon as you can socket Whirling Blades, you're going to want to do that, and then you're going to want this ring. Why? It has negative mana cost. It's going to make it so you can just Whirling Blades through the whole map, which is going to decrease the amount of time it takes you to get to actual mapping by an insane amount. The other thing that you're going to want to do, this. I use this helm for a really long time, and the reason why is because this gives absolutely stupid damage. Me equipping this right now over the helm I'm wearing adds like 3 million DPS to my build. It is absolutely crazy. This is how you can crutch a build that doesn't have a lot of damage. And what do I mean by crutch? It will give you a shit ton of damage, but it's going to make you die easier. The thing is when you hit mapping, having a ton of damage, as long as your XP gained for clearing is higher than the XP you're losing when you do die, it's a worthwhile thing. I used this helm to like level 85, and I got to mapping at level 64, I believe, and I wore this helm till 85, and it took me like a very short amount of time to get to level 85, and my total XP, it was one gaming session that I went 64 to 85, and my total XP was 250 million experience per hour, and that's just because you fly through it so fast. This is a really good crutch item. So other than that, everything is going to be in the path of building. I will also be releasing some crafting videos, so if there wasn't enough explanation as far as direction. If you have more questions, feel free to ask. If you're looking to upgrade your claw in the long term, your priorities are going to be a high attack speed, critical hit chance, critical strike multiplier, and then damage. Something like mine is not exactly reasonable unless you have like 30, 40 exalts to spend. I mean, you might get really lucky and find someone that just put it on there and um, didn't know how good of a claw they had. I don't think most people know what a good weapon is as far as a build like this. I mean, you can look at this. This looks like a way better claw to most people. This is like a 20 exalt claw. And this claw gives me over a million more DPS even in tank gear because it's so much better. And also the links make it so that my totems are 4 link totems. So something like this is absolutely stupid, but as you've seen by me using a wasp nest, it's completely unneeded. Like absolutely unneeded. But long-term goal, if you're looking to min-max it, eventually you'll want to get yourself an insane claw. Something like this is going to be the direction that you want to go. Once again, if you have any more questions, comments, please go ahead and leave them. I'm going to be doing a lot of guides. If there's something that you think that I could have done better, if you wanted the video to be longer, shorter, please give me the comments. I would like to know what's helping and what isn't helping. Thanks for watching, guys. Good luck.